Hello, it's me, Carrie, again with another episode of Gardenside Chats. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to do a real quick episode today because it's raining and I think it's just going to get worse. So, let's get to it. Today we're going to talk about weeding because weeding is a really important component of gardening. A weed can be any plant. It's just a plant that is growing where you don't want it. So sometimes like tomatoes will volunteer or lettuce will volunteer, or we'll just have like some vegetable volunteers, and they might be considered weeds if it's growing in the middle of, if you've got like a tomato growing in the middle of your lettuce patch for say. So a weed is any plant that is growing where you don't want it to grow. So I spent a lot of my time weeding. So I thought I'd go over the tools of the trade today. So for really heavy jobs, like if you're just starting out gardening, this Grub Hoe is great. There's a company here in town called easydigging.com that sells these. This one's a little bent right here. It's not supposed to be bent like that, but you get the point. It's for really serious, like ground moving. It's very heavy, and so it does a lot of like work pretty easily. So if you're making beds and like tearing up sod and stuff, this would be the kind of heavy duty tool you would use. You kind of stick your butt out, keep your back straight, kind of bend your knees, and kind of, I always like to use the corners, like the corner. You can dig up a lot of dirt that way. It is heavy, so it's kind of tiring. Alright, so this is for heavy duty, really weedy, new garden beds, things like that. A little daintier is my Stirrup Hoe. So this is a Stirrup Hoe. It's got an oscillating head. So sometimes you also see it sold as an oscillating hoe. We got this, I think, at Westlakes. So you can get them at a few hardware stores around town. You can also buy them online. This is for a garden situation where you already have kind of light, fluffy soil. It's kind of like dug up and not compacted, and the weeds are really small. This Grub Hoe is for like big weeds or new garden. This Stirrup Hoe is for young weeds, and what it does is you drag it just below the surface of the soil, and it kind of uproots young plants. So as you might see here, we've got some real small sedges, which is a pain. We got some baby Asiatic dayflower, or Asiatic daylily, which we have a lot of in my garden. So I'm just going to take the scuffle hoe, kind of stand up straight, and just dig it under the soil surface like so. So as you can see, it's kind of uprooted all of these young plants, and it's kind of just mixed up the top inch or so of the soil. If the plants are much bigger than the ones I'm working on right now, this would be a lot more difficult. So the kind of sharpened edges, like this is a sharpened edge and this is a sharpened edge, they kind of just cut through the soil and the young roots of these weeds. It's not for breaking up soil, so this is strictly for just, kind of standing here weeding like such. If you wanted to break up soil, you would go back to this one. This is the soil breaker. The Stirrup Hoe is not. So I will say that there's a whole world of hoes out there. There's like scuffle hoes, there's collinear hoes. The sky's the limit. Those are the two hoes that I use in my garden, and they work pretty well. In fact, my garden's old enough now that I very rarely use the Grub Hoe at all. And my spacing is tight enough that I actually don't really even use the scuffle hoe. I might use it around like peppers and stuff before I mulch them, but in my personal garden, I should say we use these a lot at work at the urban farm, the Veterans Urban Farm. My personal garden at home, this is my favorite weeding tool. This is called a Catucci. I got it in Peru when I went to Peru. I think it's the best tool ever. And so it has a lot of different functions. One of the functions is a weeding tool. So just like the scuffle hoe, you can take this tool in your hand and kind of just dig it, drag it under the surface, and kind of uproot those young weeds. And you can take the clod and just kind of break it up. You know, it's got a lot of various uses. I use this a lot in my home garden because my spacing's a little tighter in my garden than it is at work, and so this is really small and it kind of lets me go in and out. The sharpened tip also lets me get like kind of bigger stuff, like kind of dig out like bigger stuff like this kind of mature dead nettle. You know, it's really easy. Unfortunately, I don't know where you get this in the United States, but you can look it up. It starts with a Q. It's called Katuchi. There's also these like handheld hoes. So it's much the same, although this is a lot heavier than this, and weight, you know, is helpful. But, you know, you take this for a garden and kind of just, you know, drag it through the soil to dig up the young weeds. Weeding is way easier if you do it when the plants are young, like when the weeds are small. So always do it when the plants are small. Otherwise, you're just making so much work for yourself that it's just really painful. Another really popular weeding tool is called the snake, I think is what this is called. Somebody gave this to me. It is really nice. You can get into really tight spots with it. You kind of just drag it through the soil. So if you want to see over here, since I've kind of weeded that area, we'll go over to these carrots that I planted at an earlier garden side chat, and it's not too weedy. I've been keeping up with it, but you can see I just go along here, kind of weed up any of these dead nettles. I got some sedge, got some unknown weeds. So you kind of just scrape along the top of the soil with it. These other two handheld tools, you know, I always like to use the corners for these like square hoes. So I kind of just do one of these numbers. Uh-oh, what?
Turn the camera on.
You turn the camera off?
Okay. No, you're good.
Oh, all right. So here's the Katuchi in action around the carrots. I'll back up a little bit. So just, you know, real quick, kind of mixing up of the soil, getting these young weeds. The younger the better because it's just easier, and actually when it's easier, I find it to be more pleasant. And I like to enjoy gardening, so I like to weed often to make the task pleasant. So yeah, that's kind of my tool suite in a nutshell. I do have two other tools that I prefer to weed with, but before I move on to those, I just want to do a quick recap. The Katuchi, great tool if you can find it. Stirrup Hoe, also great tool once you have really established garden beds. If you have new garden beds, invest in this Grub Hoe because it will really save a lot of, well, it'll just really help you. Maybe not save a lot of time, but it'll help you kind of establish those garden beds and dig up some pretty established weeds. And then there's a whole suite of just like different types of handheld weeding equipment. The kind of like end all though is like, in a garden sense, you probably want to do these handheld ones, or at least I prefer to do the handheld ones, and weed when the plant is small because it makes it much easier. So the things that I've been weeding today are some are annuals, some are perennials, like the sedge is a perennial, the Asiatic daylily is an annual, but I do have a few nasty weeds in my garden that need some more digging than the tools I just showed. So if we want to come this way, so I also definitely use a shovel or a potato fork. I didn't bring my potato fork out, but I have a shovel. So this is curly dock. Curly dock is awful. If you have curly dock in your garden, you definitely want to dig it out. And curly dock is not something that you can pull out. You must dig it out because it's got a taproot. And sometimes when you dig it, you don't even dig all the taproot out. So in these cases, when we have curly dock and I'm trying to dig out the root, I would use a shovel or a potato fork. And I just kind of, might have a piece of wood under it. There you go. I think I got most of it just then, which is good. At least it will grow back slowly if I didn't get all of it. So this is the part of the root. Actually, it looks like a good chunk of the root of dock, and this is a really young dock plant, but it has an incredible amount of seeds if you let it flower and then set seed, and then it's just all over your garden. And it's just kind of a wide plant that is just kind of a pain, so you want to make sure to dig certain weeds such as curly dock out of your garden so that you get the whole root system. When you weed out weeds that are really small, generally any disturbance will kill them because they're just kind of weak and young. But it is really important for like weeds that are a little more established, like this curly dock, to get the root system out, because a lot of plants, if you just cut off the top, well, the root still have energy, so it'll just shoot up more weeds. So you definitely want to make sure to actually kill the weeds instead of just killing the top growth. And that is, you can do that by getting the roots or the vast majority of the roots out, or just doing it when they're really young and any sort of disturbance will kill them. So that's a quick basic outline of how to weed with hand tools in your garden. I personally, when I weed things like with the smaller stuff, I just leave them in the garden and they usually just like wither up and die. For the thing like dock that I just pulled out, I'll probably just throw it. I kind of have this like wooded fence line in the back of my yard. I'll probably just throw it back there just to kill it. But if you weed on a day where it's not raining and hot and dry, usually the weeds that you like pull up and disturb will die with the just the heat and the sun. But usually if you pull out a lot of weeds by the roots on a rainy day and you don't shake a lot of the dirt off of them, the plant will just like grow back. So weeds are pretty hardy and strong, so you really just want to make sure that you kill them so they're not out competing your vegetable and fruit plants for space. Alright, with that, I'm going to go back inside because it's raining. Let us know if you have any other questions about hand weeding. This was just kind of a quick and dirty tutorial on a few hand tools that I personally use in my garden. If you have any other ideas for content that you'd like to learn about as far as gardening here in Columbia, let us know and we'll cover them. As always, please like, plant, and subscribe to follow more content, or visit our website, columbiaurbanag.org, to learn more about our mission and all of the programs we do here in Columbia. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.